Hey friends, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I'm going to be sharing two collections from the fairly new indie brand called Cracked. So this brand is by Monique Van Ray over on Instagram. Some of you might be following her already, but she only launched about a month ago and has already put out two really beautiful collections. So I figured I can just do a little two-in-one video for today. So as always, I will save more of my thoughts at the end. For now, let's get into the swatches. So the first polish we have is Donut Spunk, and this is described as a glimmering oyster pearl with a dusting of taupe, and this is Monique's take on the popular glazed donut nail trend. So this definitely has more of a crelly formula, so it is a little bit milky and a tiny bit streaky or patchy on the first coat, but formula-wise, it's still really easy to work with and apply. I don't think you can tell just quite yet, but once you start to build this up a little bit, you do see that hint of taupe color to the base, and I think it adds so much warmth to it, so it's a little bit more flattering in my opinion than just the typical icy white chrome for glazed donut nails, but that could also just be a preference thing. So I think this does look really nice on two coats. It is pretty even for the most part, so I think you can wear this in two coats if you don't mind seeing some nail line. But I did want to show this built up in 3 just to show you how opaque it gets, because obviously it is kind of that milky white sort of color, so you still are going to see some nail line, but I don't think it's too bad. I really love this one though. I think it looks really nice, especially here on 3 coats. The next shade is Hairy Squat Lobster, and this is a rosy orchid with subtle red to gold shimmer. Honestly, I don't know if I agree with the description, especially of the shimmer, because to me it just looked very pinky purple, maybe a little bit of silver, not really red to gold. Either way, this one, as you can see, is super sheer. You barely get a wash of that color, but you can kind of see some patches of the pink base color, so I didn't really want to try this as a topper. I decided to just build this up on its own, and I was pleasantly surprised to see how well this built up in 2 coats considering how sheer it was on the first. You obviously still see some nail line, but it does apply pretty evenly for the most part, so I think if you're careful with your application or just don't mind seeing some visible nail line, you can definitely wear this in 2 coats, but again, I will be building this up in 3 just to show you how opaque it gets. And this is another one that I think looks best in 3 coats. It has a really nice dainty pink color. Up next we have Kissing Cupcakes, and this is a cross between a bubblegum and a hot pink with a light purpley sheen and micro pink and silver shimmers. While I normally am a fan of the color, this one had a little bit more of a pearlescent kind of formula, so as you can see, it is pretty brushstrokey on the first coat here, and it almost has a little bit of a squishy effect with the base color, which admittedly isn't my favorite look, but I don't think it's as bad as traditional pearl finishes where it's just very frosty and brushstrokey. I think the brushstrokes do diffuse a little bit, or it's just a little bit of a softer kind of pearl effect, and the shimmer really stands out and glows in this one. So I do think it looks really pretty, especially once it's built up in 2 coats. It's still a little bit sheer, but not enough that I think it warranted a 3rd, at least not for me. The next shade we have is PB and Blue Jay, and this is described as an icy blue-gray with subtle blue and silver shimmer. So I thought this was going to look more like the first 2 shades where it's that milky, crelly kind of formula, but this ended up being a little bit pearlescent, kind of like the last one. You can see there are some brushstrokes here on the first coat, and again, it is a little bit sheer, almost squishy looking, so you are going to want at least 2 coats for this one. And like the last shade, I feel like this did build up really nicely on the second coat. I just found it to be a little bit more sheer for whatever reason. I guess maybe the base is a little bit lighter or more jelly, so I just saw a little bit more nail line than I was expecting to compared to the last shade. So I did end up doing a third coat for this, but I do think you can wear this in two. It still is pretty even application. It's just, again, a matter of preference when it comes to how much nail line you want to see. And I definitely loved how this shade looks built up in 3 coats. I feel like the base color just gets a little bit deeper, so you see a bit more contrast with that icy blue shimmer. And I was just a big fan of this color. I think it's really, really pretty. Kind of reminds me of like a cozy day mani. Up next, we have Amethyst Dart Frog, and this is a sheer jelly lilac base with shimmering blues and purple shimmer. So this is definitely another sheer one, super similar to Harry's Squat Lobster, where on the first coat you just barely get a wash of the base color, but you do see a lot of the shimmer coming out. So it does look really glowy and pretty, and it was pretty even application too. So I definitely think I could try this as a topper, but I love the color that you see in the bottle, so I wanted to build it up on its own to see how many coats you would need to get to that. Here on 2 coats, you can still see right through to my nail line. It's barely obscured by just the base color, but again, it does build up so beautifully, especially with all of that shimmer. So I think it looks so beautiful, like super glassy and iridescent, but I definitely love how it looks on 3 coats the most because you see more of that purple base color, which I really love, especially in contrast with the blue shimmer. But yeah, this is definitely the sheerest from the collection. And rounding out the collection, we have Fuck Kale, which is a Kelly green cream. And this looks so intense. I think it's picking up a lot brighter on camera actually, where it almost looks neon. I wouldn't call this a neon, but definitely one of those shades that wants to be neon because it is super bright. So formula-wise, this applied really smoothly and gave me pretty even coverage for the most part. I obviously have this very awkward bald spot right in the middle of my nail, but aside from that, this is a little bit more of a crelly formula, so it's not going to be that full coverage, creamy, opaque finish like I was expecting. So that kind of was a little bit of a letdown for this polish because I think the color is beautiful and it does look pretty even again for the most part here on 2 coats. There is a hint of nail line showing, and I did have a little bit of a bald spot or a lighter spot near the left side of my nail. So I found that I did need 3 coats to make this one more full coverage and to even everything out. And again, the color looks absolutely gorgeous. It's so bright and pretty, but I just don't love having to do 3 coats for a cream. And here's the collection lineup for our favorite things. So overall, I think this is a cute lineup. I especially love the first 5. I feel like those are super cohesive. Fuck Kale is a gorgeous green, but it really feels out of place. So moving on to the PNW collection, the first shade we have is Pinching Bronzed Pennies, and this is a rich bronze that is filled with a gold shimmer that shifts to pink and green in extreme angles. This one had a great formula where it was really smooth, easy to apply, and very even coverage on the first coat. It still is just a little bit sheer, so you are going to see some nail line, but I do think that this is a shade that's dark enough to be a pretty solid 2-coater for most people, especially with shorter nails. I ended up stopping at 2 coats. I just didn't think a third was necessary for this shade, and I ended up really liking this one. At first, I was a little hesitant because I feel like the gold shimmer kind of gave it like that antique-y color or vibe, which I'm not usually the biggest fan of, but the bronze really looks nice. The next shade we have is Crop Dusted, and this is a muted mustard yellow with a slight gold shimmer. So the formula on this one was a little bit more of a crelly finish where it was just a bit more opaque than some of the other sheer shimmers that we swatched. And I feel like it had really nice and even coverage here on the first coat alone. So I was expecting this to be a solid 2-coater, but I ended up kind of having the same experience that I did with Fuck Kale, where it feels like it wants to be an opaque cream, but it's just not quite there. So I guess it's up to preference where you can can wear this on 2 coats, especially if your nails are shorter. You might be able to get away with that, but I just didn't love how it looked for me on 2 coats, so I needed a third to really even everything out and make it more full coverage. But the color is definitely really beautiful. I love this warm honey mustard kind of shade, especially for this time of year, and I really like the subtle sparkle from those golden flakies. They don't stand out too much, but they give it just enough detail where it's not like a solid cream finish. So yeah, it's a lovely color, but I also can't get over the name. I mean, my boyfriend had to tell me that crop dusting is basically when you let out like a sneaky fart. So I thought that was so funny. The next polish we have is called Fugly Muck, and this is a dirty straw yellow with a pearly green hue. So as it's described, this does have a slight pearlescent kind of finish where it's a little bit sheer on the first coat and a little bit brush strokey, but it still applies really well and evenly. It's very smooth, super easy to work with and all of that. But yeah, I was actually a pretty big fan of this one. I feel like this is one of those shades that kind of borders on the ugly pretty spectrum, where it's almost like this chartreusey sort of pearlescent shade. Just by the description alone, I would hate this, but I don't, and I'm so fascinated by it. I just think it has such a beautiful glow with that shimmer in here. But yeah, this is definitely one that is super sheer. You can see a lot of my nail line on the second coat, especially in certain angles. So I did need a third for this one to help cover that up, and I think it looks a lot better. The base color definitely leans a little bit more green the more that you build it up. So yeah, it's a really beautiful and very unique color, especially to my collection. I really like this one. The next color we have is called the Shag, and this is a soft hunter green with micro blue and green shimmers and a gold sheen. So even though this is described as a hunter green, I feel like it's a little bit more on maybe the Celadon side, where it's very, very blue leaning, and I absolutely love this one. Formula wise, this was really smooth and easy to apply, but I feel like it does teeter on being another pearlescent kind of shade. I feel like you can just see some brush strokes, but it's not what I would call a true pearl necessarily. And building this up in 2 or 3 coats definitely evens everything out a little bit more, so it just ends up feeling more like a true shimmer, if anything. It's kind of hard to describe, but overall, I think the color is absolutely gorgeous. If you watched my favorite greens video, you know that I don't have a ton of blue leaning greens, but I absolutely love them. And this one is definitely a new favorite. Like, it is just so pretty in my opinion. I think it is super unique, super, super flattering. I absolutely adore this one, especially once it's built up in 3 coats and the base color is a little bit deeper. I will say though, maybe in real life it's a tiny bit dustier, but still gorgeous. Up next, we have Another Day in the PNW, and this is a dusky, deep slate blue with green shimmers that shift to pink in extreme angles. So I'm guessing because the shimmers are in such a deep kind of base color, it's sort of obscuring the color a little bit, because to me, the shimmers look more of like a blue aqua kind of color than they look green, at least in my opinion. But either way, I think this is such a cool shade. It's just one of those moody, dark shades that really remind me of rainy days, and that's absolutely perfect for the name of this polish. Like, I think Monique definitely nailed the inspiration, and it is just such a stunning color. Formula wise, I feel like this one was a little bit thicker than some of the others, so it was a little bit finicky for me to apply in some areas, so I might have to add some thinner to my bottle at some point, but I ended up just needing 2 coats for this one. In certain angles you can see some nail line, but it is a dark shade, so it's pretty obscure for the most part. I really love how the shimmer shifts in this one too. And rounding out this collection is Velvet Seat Cushion, and this is a rich burgundy with small purple glitters. So personally, I don't agree with the burgundy description for this base color because to me, a burgundy is much more of like a reddish brown kind of color, and this is definitely more of a true purple if anything, but it still is really, really beautiful. The formula on this one kind of felt a little bit thicker like the last shade as well, but I still got pretty even coverage. Like I just have that one little bald spot near the left side of my nail. So this is a pretty solid 2-coater, I would think, for most people, especially with shorter nails. It was practically opaque for me on 2 coats, and I love the finish color of this. It is just so beautiful. It has this really rich jewel tone purple color to it that looks super dark in certain angles, but when the light hits it, you obviously get that purple shimmer and it just glows, and it really does have a velvet kind of look to it. And here is the PNW collection lineup. I absolutely love this one. I think it is so unique and so fun for fall. It just has such a beautiful range of shades that I feel are so cohesive. Even if that purple is a little bright and out there, it still works. So that wraps up my swatches for the Our Favorite Things and the PNW collections from Cracked. So as always, I would love to know your thoughts on these polishes or this brand in general, because I always think it's so fun to see people in the nail community come out with like their own brands. It's just really inspiring, and this is definitely a really pretty one. You may have seen me share a Skittle last month using the first collection, and it is obviously so up my alley, but for whatever reason, I feel like I like the PNW collection a little bit more, which is so weird because this bottom one, maybe again with the exception of the green, feels very me, but that top row is just calling my name, and I love the shades so much. They're definitely really pretty overall, and even though they aren't necessarily flashy, they still feel unique, especially to my collection, so I'm really happy to have them. And overall, they do have really nice formulas too. Again, my only gripe is with Fuck Kale. I personally think that creams shouldn't require more than 2 coats, like 2 should be the bare minimum, and we've been so spoiled by some brands that have given us like 1-coat formulas before, so having a 3-coater just is not really my favorite. So it does make me a little bit wary about future creams that we'll see from the brand, but I'm hoping that they will be a little bit improved upon. Other than that, I'm looking forward to seeing the other collections and how Monique curates them, because these two I think are really solid ways to start your brand. If you do want to try them out, I will have the Cracked Polish website linked down below, and Monique was super kind enough to make me an affiliate for the brand, so I also will have a discount code. You can use Yogi10 for 10% off your purchase. This is a one-time use code, but if you do use it, then thank you so much, and I appreciate the support. But feel free to let me know any thoughts that you have down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!